Okay, so we are live on the Where to Hunt podcast. It always takes me a second to confirm that we're good to go, but I'm seeing the little red live, so we look good here. For those that are just starting to jump on, real quick shout out. If you look at the screen, you'll notice on the left, Backwoods Grind Coffee Company. They give me the energy to do this show every single week, every Tuesday from 7 to 8 o'clock. I've stopped drinking it during the show because then I'm up till 2 in the morning because it's that effective. So, but it's really gritty coffee. Like it's got this real true grit to it, and it's got this flavor that you would have had expected when you're drinking coffee with your grandparents, or what they would have drank when they were younger, or back in their day, I should say. So, anyways, if you want to try out their coffee, they do offer sample packs. If you go to backwoodsgrind.com and you want to save a little bit of cash on that purchase, go ahead and enter in code W2H podcast and you'll get 10% off. They do run specials from time to time, so if you sign up for their email newsletter, you'll see some of that stuff come through, and sometimes it's better than the Where to Hunt discount. So whatever you can do to save yourself some cash and have some good coffee. But on the line with me today, I have Sam Soholt with Public Land Tees, the Public Land Bus. Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well today. It's only 3 weeks from the start of my hunting season, so I'm getting pretty fired up.
3 weeks. And what state are you going to hunt first, and what animal are you going to hunt first?
The first state is Colorado, and I will be chasing elk. So hiking in on the 30th, and then the season opens on the 31st.
So you're starting strong, man. Holy cow.
Oh yeah.
Have you
the only way I know how.
Have you hunted Colorado in the past for elk?
I have. It has been completely unsuccessful, but I remain optimistic. So I think finally have an area kind of dialed, but we'll see.
That's super cool. I've it's on my bucket list for my 2021 season to do that, and Colorado might be the state. I'm not sure. It sounds like it's fairly easy to draw there. Is that correct for over the counter? Am I saying
it is.
Right?
Yep. So a lot of the state right now is over the counter, I believe, and I might be wrong on this, but I've heard that this year is the last year they're actually doing over the counter tags.
Wow.
So okay. I think next year, I don't think it'll be hard to draw, but I do think it will be an application process for all of the units starting in 2020. That's just what I've heard.
Cool. Well, that's awesome that you're going to be kind of in there. We'll have to follow along. So let's take a second. You know, there's a number of folks that I think know who you are or know of you or heard of you. There's probably still some that don't too. If you want to just take the stage for a moment and kind of tell us who Sam Soholt is and kind of what you're up to, and then we'll kind of get into your story from there a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I am, like you said, Sam Soholt. I am a kind of started in the industry as a professional photographer, so that's still my main gig is doing freelance photography work for different brands within the industry. And then within the last couple of years, I've probably become more well known as the public land bus guy, basically just traveling the country, creating awareness surrounding our public land system and trying to help people get involved with conservation and understand how important our public lands are.
All right. Well, so let's back up for just a second. You're a professional photographer, and it's no doubt, like I shared a post on Instagram, or a few of them in the last couple of weeks leading up to this, and like the photos of the bus and the scenery that you capture is outstanding. Like even the one I shared today, it's got this orange glow. It's just like I like the photo a lot. It's really eye-catching. What kind of camera are you shooting? Are you shooting a Nikon, a Canon, how much equipment do you have for that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I was a Canon guy forever. And then a little over, I guess about a year and a half ago now, I made the switch to Sony mirrorless cameras.
Oh, all right.
So I knew that in 2018 I was going to be doing a lot more photo and video work combined. And so I needed something that was more powerful on the video side, but still had all of the capability on the photo side, and the Sony fit that bill perfectly. So I am running the Sony A7R3, and then I have, 4 or 5 lenses for it right now. But it was an expensive switch, but I made the full switch to all Sony Sony glass and Sony bodies.
And the learning curve, because you understand photography, like, was that difficult to switch, like, to some of the nuances of Sony versus Canon? That was pretty straightforward.
You know, it really wasn't too bad. Like, once you understand kind of like how everything works together within a camera, like the, shutter speed, f-stop, and the ISO. Like, once you have those three things down, it's really just where the buttons are on the camera. So it took me, a couple weeks to kind of get comfortable with like my speed, which I could set up a photo, was pretty slow to begin with on the Switch. But as soon as I kind of got that dialed into muscle memory, it really wasn't too bad. It's the menu is, probably the biggest difference on them, and just trying to figure out the little differences between that. But once I, kind of put together like my own like custom list on my menu, like for the things that I use the most, it was pretty straightforward.
That's good to hear. I was a Canon guy for a little while, just, and then I spent 2 weeks learning via YouTube, like probably most people, I think. And I just love it. But there's a lot to learn. Like you mentioned, f-stop and ISO and shit. Like, boy, oh boy, understanding how those things work together. Clearly you've gotten it figured out, because the photos that I see anyways, maybe it's a bunch that look like trash that you never exposed to the world, but the ones that you're putting out there look amazing, man. Well,
thank you. Yeah.
And well, and that being said too, you have some really great things to capture. Like, and so it's funny when I think of that too, because there's a number of people that would buy a GoPro and think suddenly their life would be really cool because they saw a GoPro video, but then they rode around the block in their subdivision. They're like, well, that was boring, right? So it's not just the camera; it's also the lifestyle that is the backdrop.
Yep.
Maybe get into. I guess I'm interested in, and maybe some folks will call and ask questions too, and I assume they will at some point. But until they do, I'll ask the selfish questions. Where did that idea even come from? Maybe you can back up into how you got into the hunting community in general and start from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in South Dakota, went to school at North Dakota State, and growing up, I always had an interest in filming. Definitely more on the film side of things. I was making snowboarding and wakeboarding movies with my buddies, and always had like a little Canon, like I don't even remember the model of it, like but a little Canon Handycam type thing.
Sure.
That ran off the 60-minute tapes, and before that we had the big VHS like recording, Panasonic, whatever. And I like way back in the day I was using that VHS camera to film like my buddies and I in the block, like rollerblading and just all of that type of stuff. But yeah, grew up with an interest in it, and it started to get a little bit more serious when I was in college. And I actually made a deal. So way back when, like when we were little kids, my parents made a deal with us that if we didn't drink until we were 21, we could pick out any shotgun that we wanted.
Oh, wow.
And so my older brother made it to 21, and he picked out an awesome Beretta AL-391 with, like the beautiful wood and the silver, silver action and the whole thing. I mean, it was just gorgeous gun. But when I was kind of getting closer to turning 21, I, like, at least in my head, I felt like I wanted to take my video production, like, to the next level. And so I was doing research on different video cameras, and I actually, I turned 21 and I split video camera with my dad as my purchase. And so I got a Canon XH-A1S, which was, at the time, it recorded in 1080 and was still a tape camera at that time, but had 20 times optical zoom. I mean, like it was whatever, $3,600 or whatever it was when I bought it. And then, it basically sat on the shelf in my college house and I hardly ever used it because like the idea of being a film guy, certainly outweighed like actually going out and learning how to shoot.
It's hard to put the rubber on the road sometimes.
It is, yeah. And it's just really hard to get started. And like, I couldn't figure out, like, I would go out and shoot some video, but then I didn't know much about editing. And so I just didn't know where to start. And so, yeah, it sat on the shelf for a long time, but my final year of college, I started archery hunting, and I had a really successful season. I ended up, my first buck was just this little 2x3 whitetail, and I was all excited. And then I was back up at school and had a family connection to some land north of Fargo, and went up, and I ended up shooting a really nice deer just a week later. And so I was all, jacked up and about shooting these 2 deer, and felt like I was, this incredible hunter. And I really want to try to work for a hunting show or do something along those lines. And so I literally just started cold calling and cold emailing every hunting show I could find a contact for. And so, I was in between classes and stuff. I was just emailing info at, theoutdoorchannel.com or whatever it might be. But earlier in the year, a friend of mine had sent me a link to one of the Midwest whitetail episodes of a guy killing this giant deer in Iowa. And I had remembered that, and so I went back and went on the website and found the email for them. And I sent an email and asked if they ever, if they were hiring people or looking for interns. And like an hour later, Bill Winke got back to me and was like, yeah, we're always looking for interns. Why don't you come down over Christmas break and we'll do an interview? And so I finished up school that semester, drove down to southern Iowa and met with Bill for about a half hour. And he's like, all right, well, we'll let you know. And so I left there not knowing if I had the job. But a couple days after that, he called me and told me I had the position. And that next summer I moved down to Iowa and started learning how to actually film and edit and manage pro staff. And that was kind of the start in my in the industry. And then from there, I worked there for about 6 months, and then I moved to Colorado. My brother had started a backcountry hunting store and archery shop, and so I moved out there to help with him. And I was basically built his YouTube channel up and was creating product overview videos and a few different hunts that we went on or whatever, but mostly just like product stuff for the store. And then did that for almost a year, but I had met one of the sales reps that was selling to the shop out there, needed a new sales rep for the territory of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, and he hired me on to do that. And I thought, well, what better job than to travel around 3 of the most beautiful states and sell hunting and fishing gear. And I quickly realized that it was definitely an uphill battle, and at that time that sales rep agency with the brands that we had were good, but not very well known. So it was a struggle trying to
penetrate the market.
Sold quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yep. And I ended up selling quite a bit, but I only got paid commission, and only about 20% of what I had sold in actually shipped. And so it was kind of I lost a lot of money in a very short period of time. And so, but randomly, I met a guy in a coffee shop in Bozeman, and he had been on the phone talking about video production work, and I just kind of struck up a conversation, asked him about what he was doing, and he said that he was working on a video project for one of the businesses in Bozeman, but his main gig was producing a hunting show, and so we, hit it off, obviously, after that, just because I had just finished up, a year before filming for Midwest Whitetail, and was told him that if he ever needed help, let me know. And it was less than a month later, I was on a plane to Anchorage to go film a brown bear hunt.
Oh, goodness.
In Alaska for a couple weeks. Yeah. And,
you must have been like, is this really happening? Is this my life right now? Like, I would have had
those moments. No, that's exactly how I felt.
What just happened?
Yeah. No, it was bizarre. It was just right time, right place, and, made the effort to start the conversation, which led to a job in Alaska. I mean, at least a 2-week gig in Alaska.
Right, yep.
And yeah. And so I'd done it as just like a way to supplement my income while I was doing the sales rep thing. But while I was on the hunt in Alaska, it led to a connection where the Coast Guard Alaska, the show, needed another shooter. And my connection got me in touch with the producer, and I called up and they hired me for the job. So I quit my sales rep agency and flew up to Kodiak and ended up living up there for almost 5 months.
Holy cow. Let's take a break right there. Let's bookmark Kodiak, Alaska, because we do have a caller on the line. And
okay,
we've been
sounds
hanging
good.
out for a little bit. So it's Zach, and I've messed up his last name in the past, Zach Hoheisel out of Appleton, Wisconsin. So I'm going to bring him in right now.
Okay.
Zach, you're live on the Where to Hunt podcast. How you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, we're doing good. Thanks for calling in. We got Sam on the line with us, so I assume you see that and you're watching and felt the urge to give a ring. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, well, I know I'm not going to lie. I called you before the episode started to warn you that I was probably going to do this. So, Sam, I just want to thank you. You are one of, by far, the biggest influences in the outdoor industry on me. So I just want to, like, fanboy out for a second and tell you, thank you for what you're doing and the way you go about what you do. It really means a lot to me, to see people like you that I feel like are truly doing things for the right reasons and promoting public land and promoting the hunting lifestyle and stuff. So I just want to thank you for all you do and the inspiration you are for, kind of like the younger crowd in the outdoor industry. I think it's really great.
Oh man, well, thank you. I mean, that's just a huge compliment. So I really appreciate you calling in just to say that.
Yeah, no problem. I've been a kind of a long time follower, and I don't know. I was actually on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about kind of some of the stuff that I'm doing with my little company outdoor industry, and I called Eric before this to say just to let him know that I really look up to you, and I think it's awesome that he's having people like you on this podcast. You really are one of my. I have very few big influences anymore that I really choose to follow, and you're definitely one of them. So I really do want to say thank you.
Yeah, no, man. Thank you for following along with everything I'm up to. It's, that's the whole reason this whole thing goes around. I'm, having people that are willing to follow along with my journey. So as long as people are willing to do that, I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
Awesome.
Dude, thanks so much for the call, man. Man, I think some of the emojis coming through are like tears and happy faces. So that was really great. Thanks, man. That was awesome.
That's perfect.
No, yeah, it's. Go ahead.
I would say you enjoy your night, man. If you got any final thoughts, let me know, and then we'll drop you off after a final word from you.
Well, I got my baby here. I can see her starting to cry, and I'm sure my son's gonna be running to the door any minute because it's about his bedtime. But I'd love to stay. I could talk both your ears off all night about all the fun stuff you guys are doing. But I better get going and let you do your thing. So thanks again, Sam. And thanks for letting me call in, man. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah, it's your show, man. That's how I put it. So have a good night.
Yep. See ya.
So that's awesome. You really are an inspiration, dude. That's awesome. You're the first guest
that's an incredible,
yes. No one's ever done a call like that. That makes me feel excited, and it goes to show that what you're doing is making a difference.
Well, that is that's the biggest compliment I could receive is just someone just calling to say that. That's huge. So I'm glad there's I'm always surprised that there's anybody following along, but I really appreciate people that are willing to call and let me know that I'm doing some things the right way.
That's good to hear. See, for me, when anyone like gives me a review or something, I have to show my wife because she's like, people listen to you. So I just need to show her. That's good stuff, man. That's super intrinsic. Okay, so we're in Kodiak, Alaska, and you've had this serendipitous kind of happening of meeting this person that led to another connection that got you a gig to be filming out there for. It was what show was it? It was on the Discovery Channel.
It was Coast Guard Alaska on the Weather Channel. Channel. Yep.
Thank you. Okay.
And then so I did that for roughly 4 months, and the History Channel had come up to Kodiak to film a whole show about bear hunting, and so through just kind of the fact that we were staying on the island, the casting director had come by and was asking if we knew of any, basically characters on the island that they needed to be interviewing, and like guides and outfitters and hunters and whatever. And so through just meeting them, I told them, hey, if you have an opening for a camera operator spot, let me know, because I'm filming this Coast Guard show, but my forte is filming hunts. And so if they needed somebody that had the wherewithal to go on a hunt with guides and outfitters that actually know what they're doing, to let me know. And sure enough, they had an opening. And so I jumped off of the Coast Guard show and was filming the hunt for the History Channel for basically 30 days straight of brown bear hunting.
So were you in the forest for 30 days straight, or just filming for 30 days straight?
Well, filming for 30 days, but it was like the first hunt we were in like a little cabin thing, and going out hunting every day. And then the second hunt that I filmed was like a backpack hunt. So I hopped on a bush plane and flew in and landed way up this river, and then hiked back in with the guys. And I think I was on that hunt for like 6 days. I was actually replacing a cameraman who had gotten sick back on that hunt, and so I did that. And then after that one, I flew in. Like my last hunt up there was actually what led me to be a professional photographer. It was in Larson Bay on Kodiak, and we were staying in like a big cabin thing. And the hunter was the owner of Timney Triggers, and his best buddy was up there hunting with him. And Chris Ellis happened to be the PR guy for Remington Firearms. And so he hired, after that hunt, I had been shooting a bunch of photos and gave them a whole drive with, a pile of photos on it. And he hired me to, like, the next month to fly down to Arizona and shoot one of Remington's new product seminars. And so that was my first official professional photo gig. And then since then, it's just been one connection after the next, just leading to, like, I met Chris and he hired me for that. And then I met a whole bunch of writers. One of the editors hired me for another job. And then it just kind of kept snowballing from there.
Like snowballing. So at any point, so at some point, as this starts to catch, there must have been some thoughts in your mind like, holy crap, can I really do a photo shoot for Remington? And then
when
you get busy, you don't even have time to think about that. But like, what was that like for you?
Oh yeah, no, that first shoot, like, I mean, obviously I had been doing a bunch of filming, but I had never only shot photos for somebody. So I was definitely terrified, and I rolled into, like, I bought a brand new camera, like right before the shoot, and rented a couple extra lenses. And so I was like, well, I need to roll in and look legit.
Right, they're paying
so
you, right? Like,
I rolled in.
Yeah.
Right. So I rolled in with, all the camera gear and everything, and just worked my ass off for the duration of the shoot. And I think made a good impression, because Remington hired me to do an additional 3 product seminars. And so, they had one every few months. And it was on one of those seminars that I met an editor for the editor of Peterson's Hunting Magazine. And then after I'd met him, it was only like 2 weeks later, I got a call from him, and they wanted me to go up to British Columbia and shoot the cover shoot for Peterson's with Joe Rogan on the cover. And so
you're like, oh my God.
Next thing I knew, I was
fangirling out, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it just kept like every opportunity, and I just kept saying yes. And was at a point in my life where I was able to just dive off into every opportunity that came along. And yes, the next thing I knew, I was up in BC with Rogan and Ben O'Brien, who's a good friend of mine now, on the cover shoot for Peterson's. And that was really the big stepping stone in my photography career that kind of launched me into the next echelon of shooters within the space. And then since then I've been all over the world shooting photos.
How fun, though, too, to really get to do something that you seem to have a passion for on both sides, right? Like, because you could have passion for photography, and a lot of people do, and they'll do senior photography and weddings and various things, headshots, and maybe some of the stuff that they really like to get, like nature. And here you are with that passion in one hand and hunting seemingly in the other. I mean, that's a really great marriage for you. It's no wonder you've had success, because it probably doesn't feel a whole lot like work. I'm sure it's a lot of work. I don't mean to discount it all, but man, that's like the best of both worlds. It's not common for people to land in a spot like that. I don't think.
Yeah, no, I was super, super, super fortunate, and just, being able to, like you said, have those two things married together was pretty incredible, because it's definitely a pile of work, and I live on the road, and and I basically travel 275 days a year, and whatever. But it's the lifestyle I chose, and it'd be really hard for me to go do anything else at this point.
No, right? Like, hey, I need these things on my desk, but I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna go home now. I'm done.
Yeah, like
5
no.
minutes in, like, yeah, I changed my mind. But it can't be cheap to fill a gas tank of a bus either, So there's that.
Oh no, yeah.
And the maintenance, right? Tires and who knows what an oil change looks like.
There's definitely trade-offs.
That's crazy. Well, so how do we get from there to where you're at now with this bus? Like, where did that come about? Like, was that an idea that landed in your lap and you're like, okay, I think I can work with this? Or was it something that you were kind of envisioning in some way, shape, or form? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so it kind of evolved over the course of 4 years. It evolved. So when I was working with my brother, we had talked about getting a bus and using it as basically a marketing rig for his shop. And then it evolved from that into, well, maybe we could use it as a mobile archery shop. And we could travel, because his shop's in Fort Collins, but there was a bunch of areas surrounding there that didn't have an archery shop. And so we thought, well, maybe we could do this, and then we could travel out, and then one night a week we're in Laramie, Wyoming, and one night a week we're in, wherever, and help people work on their bows and bring all the arrows and everything. And that didn't happen. And then we're like, well, a year later, we were like, we should get a bus and do a 12-state turkey hunting tour and just rip all the seats out and throw some bean bags and cots in there and just go travel around and
just
smack
make it a
turkeys
total
for a while.
Freaking man cave, huh? But not in the real sense.
Yeah, exactly.
The initial idea is probably more of what I would have done. Here's a couple of cots in this thing, and it just smells like fart,
Right. Right. So, but then from there, obviously none of us ever did anything with it, but every time I saw a bus, it was like, oh man, I just kept seeing the possibilities of what you could do with a bus. And the idea, I thought well, maybe I should, maybe I could figure out a way to if I bought the bus and did the build, maybe I could get sponsors to help pay for my travels, and I could, document the whole thing. And there was no, without a bigger purpose behind it, it just didn't seem to make sense. It didn't seem like a sustainable model. And so I, kind of put it on the back burner. And at the end of my 2016 season, I had come off of a really good year of shooting photos and hunting, and was just kind of winding down. And at that point, I was 29 years old, and I was trying to figure out, okay, I've kind of been, kind of at the top. I've reached a lot of the goals that I've had within the photography space. What's the next thing? I just kind of kept brainstorming, what do I want to do? And this bus idea kept popping up, and I was actually on a road trip somewhere and just driving, and everything in 2016 with the election, everyone was talking about the public land transfer legislation that was on the platform. And that just really was kind of bugging me. And so I was like, well, what if I basically combine the two ideas and turn the bus into a rolling billboard for public land as a way to raise awareness about this issue and get people to talk about it more? Because the more voices that are talking about it, the more people that are sharing it, the more people that are interested in it, the bigger voice that we have as a community, and the bigger change that we can have, or the bigger change we can stop. The idea just hit me one day when I was driving down the road, and I made a couple phone calls, and while on that same road trip, and one of them being to Ben O'Brien, and he connected me with Land Tawney over at BHA. And, Yep, and Land was more than willing to share the message when I got it rolling. And so about a month after that, I owned a school bus. And this whole project started.
That must have been a funny feeling, that initial, okay, here it is.
It was
initially figure out how to even drive it? Where you're like, man, the steering wheel is huge, and look at the door, I can open it. I would just be so silly at first.
Yeah, it was pretty bizarre. It's such a long vehicle, on a single chassis, that. It's your wheelbase is so long, and you still have this big tail end sticking out. I have in the past, I've driven whatever, trucks with long trailers and whatever, but still, like, having it all connected together was a completely different animal.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't say I've ever driven a school bus. My dad drives a roll-off for a living, and that's a big vehicle. But yeah, it's kind of cool. So at some point I had seen a video. I don't know if it was on YouTube or Instagram. It was probably both, or one led to the other or something, but you had mentioned you were going to document this process. And we talked a bit offline, and we mentioned Gary Vee, and he talks a lot about document versus create. I think there's room for both, but by documenting, you're creating kind of just inevitably, like that's just what's happening. And you had documented some of the process of you building this out. And somewhere in there, I think I heard you say or write or something that I don't know how to do like carpentry, right, or woodworking, or I don't know how to do this stuff. And so I'm actually fascinated because I'm that guy. I never really learned that stuff. And I try to do things here and there. My wife is like, what are you doing? You don't know how to do this. I'm like, well, no, but I don't know how to do a lot of things until I figure them out. That's the fun of it. So like, did you have some help with that? Or is that something that you had to YouTube and figure out? Or how did you get it to look? Because it looks extraordinary. This isn't just a bus. Like, you're living in this thing all the time, right?
Yeah. Yep. So I had like a little, let's call it a prep course, right? Like a couple weeks before I started the build on the bus, my parents have a little lake cabin, and we wanted to redo a couple of the end rooms. And so my brother, or my friends and I actually did all the demolition. And then my brother and I watched him do all the framing. And then we did tongue and groove pine in 3 rooms at the end of the cabin. So that was basically the gist of my building experience at that point.
Plenty.
So
you don't need to know more than that, right?
No, yeah, as long as you think about it in layers, right? So you kind of think about, like, for me, like, I was like, okay, it's just a Photoshop project. Like, everything's in layers.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Okay.
Yeah, I just had to imagine what I wanted it to look like, and then like go back to the first layer, and then just start building from there. And there was definitely some trial and error, like as far as like figuring out like what screws, what length of screws, what type of stuff I needed to use to actually anchor everything to like the frame of the bus, because there's not a lot of meat to a bus other than like there's a steel beam that basically runs in an arc, as a shell down every 20 inches down the bus, from side to side. There's this big steel arc, and so I had to find the right screws, the self-tapping screws, to hold all the wood to the frame, and luckily that works. I figured after about 10,000 miles everything would start falling apart, but so far nothing has broke on me on the build.
Really? So, I'm not saying that like I'm surprised like you would suck at doing that, but I would have expected maybe something right after having gone through it, that something would have jostled or displaced or what have you. But as you're talking, I'm playing the YouTube video on the screen for the listeners of some of this process that you've kind of documented.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, because that would have worried me if I were been like, oh man, I'm just waiting for the day when something's going to break that I didn't think of, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, and and going into it, the only thing that's really moved is the floor, which was just a click lock, like vinyl plank floor. So I knew that was going to shift around a bit. But everything else, like I was like, okay, it's a bus, it bounces a lot. I was like, I need to overbuild the crap out of this stuff. And it probably has, triple the amount of anchors than it needs. But at least
is there a lot
nothing
of
has
clanking
fallen.
of things like pots and pans, plates, cups? That's a whole other thing too. I guess people in the RV world probably are accustomed to that kind of stuff and prepping for it. And I'm assuming you've taken a similar approach.
Yeah, I thought it would be worse, but with the way everything kind of tucks in to where I put it all, like there's not a ton of noise. And to be honest, I probably couldn't hear it over the engine anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, interesting. What a fun investment. What a fun project. That must have been really awesome to see it start to kind of come to life, because then you could probably really envision your future with that. Like, I think when I was 15, I remember sitting in the driver's seat and thinking about how am I going to drive a car? Like I'm not a gangster, right? So I'm not going to do this whole lean with the left hand up, but I was more like, I'm going to rest my elbow on my knee and hold at 10 o'clock kind of guy. And as a 15-year-old thinking about what it'd be like in the world of actually being able to drive with your license, you would envision these things, right? This isn't uncommon, but for you, probably like getting into this whole bus thing, it's like someday I'm going to be in this thing and I'm going to look over this beautiful landscape in Montana or Wyoming or wherever. That's cool.
Yeah, no, and it was really like, the initial like start to the build, right? Like, I mean, I built, like I had painted the ceiling, put the floor in, and then I had kind of like the skeleton of all the furniture done within a couple of weeks. But then it really, like, the process slowed way down when I started to do all the finish work, and because it's 10,000 trips in and out of the bus. Go in, measure, go out, cut like 3 or 4 boards that are, all the spaces in there are real short. So everything's, if you're cutting things for, across, it's like 13 inches every board. And so it was just a million cuts. And but as it started to come together, as like you said, you could start to just envision like life kind of on the road and being able to go visit all these places and kind of show that off and talk about it. And it's just overall it has gone way further than I ever dreamt that it would.
Yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. I mean, certainly you've gotten a lot of attention from folks, and it's definitely something that stood out. So it seems as though you're almost fulfilling the mission that you've set out to kind of put out in the world. And here we are, we're coming up to our next election. So to think that in what seems like a short amount of time, right? I'm sure you've covered a lot of ground, but do you have like a favorite state so far, or is it just that general region of the country that you love?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Montana resident, so it's hard to beat Montana, just for the opportunities that are out there and just like there's so many different landscapes in Montana that it's just absolutely gorgeous. But I mean, I haven't really, as far as public land goes, I have yet to go to a place where I'm like, you know what, this is really ugly. That hasn't happened yet, so I feel pretty lucky about that.
It's cool. It's cool, man. So I guess some of the questions that I ask in the beginning of a show tend to be, what's your favorite animal to hunt? What's your favorite weapon of choice? I didn't ask you those questions. Considering that, some of the pictures I've seen you in, you're holding up all sorts of animals. So do you have a favorite? It sounds like it could be elk. Maybe that's a good guess for me.
So my first job in the industry was Midwest Whitetail, and I spent basically 3 months, 2 times a day in a tree, morning and evening, and then editing and talking about whitetail hunting in the middle of the day. So it was just, for some reason, like that, just chasing whitetails, like it really got ingrained in just under my skin. And so every year, like when late October starts to hit, like I usually stay pretty focused on whatever animal I'm chasing, but whenever late October rolls around, there's definitely only one thing on my mind, and it's being in a tree somewhere chasing whitetails. So I think that's probably my favorite, but definitely elk right up there, and mule deer. I have a hard time picking just one, but I definitely love deer hunting.
It's almost like you have different ones for different reasons. Kind of like you have different friends that you like for different reasons, right? Like there's always that one friend that you can get totally trashed with and swear around them. But that's not great for every occasion, right? Sometimes you want a friend that you can really
exactly right.
intellectual with, or something like that. Like you have different things for different reasons. I'm definitely a whitetail guy through and through, although I have to say I haven't hunted a whole lot else. So, but it's funny you say, like in October when that chill comes, it's something that just suddenly seeps into your bones and changes your being, and you're like, I have to go do this thing, and it's not even something that you can articulate or explain to folks that don't get it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I pretty much become obsessed.
Yep. Same.
as soon as that time of year rolls around.
And you said you're about 3 weeks out, so that's exciting. Well, let's pivot real quick then, and maybe tell me about one of your most memorable hunts. And I'm excited to hear this from you as someone that has traveled the world, right? Maybe even if it wasn't for hunting, what is the most memorable hunt for you? What stands out in your mind? I know I asked you to think about this question before we started, so I'm excited to kind of see what you have.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how I should approach it. Maybe I'll tell two stories, like my favorite hunt of my own and the favorite hunt that I've gone and been a part of. So I'll start, like, my favorite hunt that I have been a part of, at least the most, like, I don't know, we'll call it the most adventure. I went down to New Zealand to shoot photos on one of Yeti's ambassador hunts. And what year was that? It must have been April of 17. I don't know. It's all running together now.
2
Anyway,
years ago, yeah.
Flew down to New Zealand. Yeah, flew down to New Zealand, and basically we hunted tar first and then chamois, but it was just like the tar hunt was just hiking from the valley floor and then 3,600 vertical feet up to the top where the tar lived, and getting to watch the hunter successfully take a tar. And, like, I mean, it's just we ended up in, hiking across these knife ridges at night in a snowstorm, and it's blowing 60 miles an hour, and everything's snow on it or ice or whatever, and it's just like one step either direction and you're in a bad way. And so it was New Zealand's one of the most gorgeous places I've ever been, and then just to add like this complete adventure on top of that was for sure my favorite hunt that I've ever documented. Yeah. And then as far as like my own personal hunt, I grew up being a waterfowl hunter, and that was all I did. But when I was, as I have gotten into the big game side of things, the area that I grew up in and spent a lot of time chasing ducks, I started to look at it more from a deer hunting standpoint. And the very first year that I kind of came back here and wanted to try to do some archery deer hunting, I had like a gap between my photo jobs, and I had like, I don't know, it was like 18 or 19 days I could burn. And I was like, I'm just going to soak in every single second of every day and go hunt a new spot every single day. And if I'm not hunting, I'll just be hiking around different spots and scouting. And I hiked into a new area and kind of was going down this little 2-track trail, and kind of bounced off the 2-track and went in, and I found this just massive scrape. I mean, like probably 5 feet by 5 feet, obviously a big community scrape in the middle of this the thick chunk of woods. And I immediately backed out, and that spot, you could only hunt it on a straight east wind. That was like the only way that was going to work, and that not very often you get an east wind.
Right.
But 2 days later, yeah, so it got lucky, and 2 days later it was going to be an east wind at like 10 miles an hour. And so I was like, all right. So I, woke up at like 3 a.m. and I hiked into this spot and kind of looped way back around to make sure I wasn't busted by anything that might be moving through. And the area that I wanted to hunt, the only tree that I could like really get up that was straight enough was only about, I don't know, 6 or 8 inches in diameter. So a real thin tree, and with no cover. And I was like, all right, well, so I ended up being like 30 feet up this tree. And it was really warm. It was not like a typical like rut day. It was like, I don't know, 65 degrees. And I was like, well, we'll see if I see anything. But it just happened. I had spotted a doe that had come out of this like thick bedding area and being followed by what appeared to be a pretty good buck. And they kind of moved off to my north, and I was like, all right, well, deer are on their feet. And about 20 minutes later, the doe that had come out, she was like this real gray color. And so I looked out and I saw this doe, and I was like, that's got to be her, because most of it, like it was just a really like a weird coloration on her.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, that buck that had been following her like busts out of the brush at about 50 yards from me, and she was looping back behind me, and he tried to cut the corner and came within 20 yards, and I shot him right there, public land. I mean, he turned and ran directly under my tree stand and fell over about 20 yards past my tree. And it's actually the deer that's hanging in the bus is that deer. But as far as like hunts that I have done completely on my own in a completely new area, like basically just kind of figuring it all out, like it's by far the most rewarding hunt that I've ever been on.
That's one where it seems as though you had a challenge to yourself and you fulfilled that challenge,
Yes.
of your own accord and capability. And that is a great feeling. That's hard to beat. And it's cool that he's in the bus. What state was that?
Yeah. That was South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Yep.
Okay. And that's where you are now, right?
That's where I am now.
That's kind of cool. How about that, huh? Maybe it's a little nostalgia closer coursing through
that's
you
right.
to arrive at that. And you probably are you looking at that buck right now too? You're like, oh, well, that's one I could talk about.
Yep, exactly.
That's cool. That's cool, man. Thanks so much for sharing that. Gosh, I feel like I've been kind of envisioning myself in through your journey, right, to a degree. And you've definitely not squandered anything. You've definitely squeezed the juice out of everything that has been put in front of you in terms of an opportunity. It's hard to realize when there's opportunities in front of you. I guess there's a number of people doing things in this space now. There's a new podcast pops up every single day, it seems like. I've been doing this since 2013. Mm-hmm. I'm certainly not new to it. I have a new format, perhaps. But and then there's a lot of guys doing video work. And a number of them I talk to and work with on a regular basis. Do you have any advice for some of these folks doing this? I would say the advice that I've given, just so it's not repeated potentially, is, make sure you know what your why is. Like, why are you doing it? Because if you don't have that right, it sounds like you took the time to figure that out, right? Like you said, I could do this bus and I get sponsors, but then that kind of breaks down pretty quick, right? Then there's no fulfillment out of that. So there has to be a mission that you're working towards, that vision. What's your advice to folks doing stuff in this space?
Yeah, I think the biggest two things really, and the first one is trying to keep your eyes as open as possible to seeing opportunities. And it's if you slow down a little bit and just kind of take stock of the things that are coming to you, it starts to be pretty easy to see what's an opportunity and what's just talk, so that piece of advice is just kind of slow down a little bit. And like you said, figure out what do you want to get out of this whole thing? Like, what's the purpose? And other than just shooting a pretty photo or a really epic, video clip, what is the mission behind it? Because there's a lot of people that can shoot a really great photo. A lot of people that can shoot a better photo than I can. And a lot of people that shoot way better video than I can. But I think they're really good on the technical side, but there's no bigger story behind it, and I think that's where it falls flat. So yeah, just slow down and figure out why you're doing it. And then the next thing is, and I don't know if you know Matt McCormick at all, but we say this all the time, and it's just be different, not better.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly trying to be better than everybody out there, that's fine. You might be the world's greatest photographer or the world's greatest videographer. But if you're just kind of doing the same thing that everybody else is, but even if it is a little bit better, you're just lost in the crowd.
Yep.
So figure out what your niche is. It doesn't even have to be that big of a difference, but just figure out what your style is or what's your purpose is or whatever, and do that to the fullest extent. Don't quit halfway.
Yeah, it's hard to know when to keep going or give up. In some cases, people give up when they're real close. The being different is something that I recently adopted in my kind of thought process. I read a book called Play Bigger. I think it comes from the Silicon Valley, Y Combinator world, but it talks about just that. Airbnb didn't do things better than hotels. Uber didn't necessarily do things better than taxis, so that's arguable, I guess, to a point.
Right.
5 Hour Energy
Sure.
didn't do a better energy drink. They all did something different, and that's a great story and a great tip of advice. Certainly, a bus is different, right? And the way you've captured your story is different. Do you have any other tours coming up? Are you going to do another tour of some sort here?
Yes. I'm trying to think how much I can say about it. The bus will be used a little bit less this year. The original plan with the bus was to do it for a year and then figure out what was next. But now I'm 2.5 years in. So it's time to figure out
You
what the
love
next
the
step is.
bus. That's what that is.
Yeah, yeah, and the bus has been great, and it will continue to be great. And I'm going to use it for things, and like I'll use it on hunts, and I'll use it at events, and it'll continue to be kind of an icon for public lands.
Mm-hmm.
But got a few things in the works that I'll probably be announcing here within the next couple of weeks, just to kind of take it to the next level and do something new and different, and just really add fuel to the fire for the mission and what I've been up to. So as soon as that comes down the pipeline, I'll make a big announcement on my page and everywhere, and I'll be sure to let you know so you can share it and be like, hey, anybody who listened to the podcast with Sam, this is what he was talking about when he was being very vague at the end of the podcast.
We all have things like that going on, so I'm sure folks understand.
Yep.
But it'll be really exciting for those that hear this, whether live now or in podcast land later tonight, and the rest of forever, I guess. What that'll look like. That's really exciting. And just to make sure people can support your mission and cause, hopefully people have a good idea of where to go. But just in case, let's nudge them in the right direction. How do they find you? What should they be doing when they interface with you and your brand? What makes the biggest impact for you?
Sure. So if people want to follow along with the journey, the best place to find me is just on Instagram. My handle is @Sam Soholt. And I also have a YouTube channel that is just my name, Sam Soholt. But if people really want to support and make the biggest impact, my brother and I started a company called Public Land Tees. And every $5 from every single item that we sell off of the website goes directly back to conservation and public land protection.
I'm wearing the shirt right now, so it's good to know that my money went to a cause that I am also in support of. That's a pretty big deal, and I feel like there's a number of folks doing that. But $5, that's a bit. That's not. I mean, you could use that money, and so that's a big.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people really
it's a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's close. It's like ends up being like 18% of our revenue sources go directly back to conservation organizations. So we've given the latest check that we wrote was we gave $5,000 to Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation as part of a way to purchase a piece of private property, but that opens up 26,000 acres of landlocked public in Montana.
You gotta have somewhere to park that bus, right? So
right.
If you don't have
That's
conservation
right.
efforts, like that makes more sense,
Yep.
right? Yeah, that is the mission. Dude, that's great. That's not a lot of. That's a big chunk of change to give those folks.
Yeah, so this year has been really good. We've had, thankfully, just a lot of support with the shirts and hats and cups and stickers and everything that we're selling. And so we've been able to kind of leverage some different things that we've been doing to be able to raise enough money to actually make an impact instead of, here's $50 or here's $100. And my goal is I'd love to give away, checks that are $20,000 instead of $5,000. I would,
Sure.
The more that we're giving back, the better. And it just, even if it's, we gave $3,000 to backcountry hunters and anglers a few weeks before the RMEF donation. And even, if that pays for a plane ticket for somebody to fly out to Washington, D.C. and lobby on the behalf of public lands, like, use all of that money for that. Like, it's the reason we're giving money to the organizations is because they're the ones who are working on those things every single day. And so they know exactly how to leverage that money to make it go the furthest when it comes to protecting our resources.
I couldn't agree more. And as we talked offline a little bit, like my passion is certainly aligned with yours in that regard. I've gotten on my soapbox a number of times on this kind of platform, and I think public land is a privilege, and it's something that I hope no one takes for granted. And the more people that understand your mission and can get behind supporting it, to do, like you said, to do action, not just talk. When you talk about some of the tips that you had, this is a great way to actually do something that's actionable and help those that can kind of do those things for us on our behalf.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, Sam, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and travel, and I'm sure you have plenty going on and lots to do, especially to get ready for hunting season. we took one call. We have a couple comments come through. Feel free to kind of come back into this page and maybe address some of those. For time's sake, I'll let you do that if you get some time. But it was a pleasure to have you on the show, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was really fun to do it this way and have it be live like that. I really had a fun time doing that. So thanks for having me on, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Heck yeah. Thank you.